month on at least a month on either side. 1 month shorter spring, 1 month shorter fall, and of course a 2 month longer winter. That's a best case scenario, a mini ice age, which would be a reduced growing season, and of course all the effects it has on grains, which I'll talk about that in a moment. Worst case scenario, we could in as short as 3 years, we could be at the beginning of a full-blown ice age that goes on for centuries. That's a worst-case scenario. The climatologists at NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, I'm sure they're frantically working all their work hours, building computer models and trying to extrapolate and determine which way this thing's going to go. But it's basically, when it comes down to it, Gwen, it's very sophisticated, highly educated guesswork is all it is.
May I ask another question?
Please, ask all you want.
In South Dakota, I notice even in the bitter cold of winter here, when we have cloudy days, when we have cloud cover, we're really grateful for it sometimes because it keeps the area warmer.
Right.
It's when we have those clear blue skies that we get that really bitter cold. So is it possible with the chemtrailing and the weather geoengineering that they're doing, are they creating a cap that's causing the heat to stay trapped close to the earth, that's causing the melting?
Well, first of all, these people are a lot of things. They are ultimately evil, and ultimately this is a spiritual war on one hand. On the other, I don't believe they do anything that would hurt themselves. One of the things that's going on right now is the reduction of the magnetosphere, which is a magnetic energy field that protects us on Earth from harmful radiation coming from space. One of the things that's in the chemtrails is a chemical that's used in medical science for absorption of radiation. And I'm blanking out on what that chemical is, but it's commonly used in hospitals to absorb radiation. And they're spraying this stuff in the air. And they may be doing nothing more than trying to protect themselves from radiation, quite frankly. Artificial clouds do make usually clouds make the world cooler as opposed to warmer in terms of the surface of the Earth. Now, at nighttime, I notice that cloudy nights in the wintertime usually make for a warmer night. Your observations in South Dakota, I'm not familiar with your weather up there. Down here in the Ozarks, warm days in the wintertime are usually warmer. So we don't see what you're seeing, but I do know that cloudy days at night do make for warmer nights. Is everybody? We have stunned silence.
No, my mic was muted. I was talking. It's one of those things, okay. It's kind of down by my elbow, and I must have hit it. But anyway,
let's talk about the effects. One of the things I don't like to do too much, Gwen, is go down rabbit trails of, for example, did British Petroleum intentionally set off this oil spill, or did they not? That's a rabbit trail. Well, unless some insider from inside British Petroleum spills the beans, we may never know. I refer to myself and the rest of us as barefoot peasants. Us barefoot peasants have to deal with the consequences, regardless of whether it was intentional or not. So here's the main consequence we're looking at the moment, and that's the adverse impact on agriculture, especially the growing of grains. Grains are what feed the people. Grains are what feed the animals.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the Chicago Board of Trades for futures on corn, wheat, spelt, oats, barley, all the grains, you'll see they're going up dramatically. Futures prices are at record levels and going higher on some of these grains.
Well, hell, the Mississippi washed away quite a bit of a lot of the grain fields in the Midwest.
Well, actually, those numbers, they look horrific until you understand the real size of agriculture in this country.
Mm-hmm.
That took place about a 3-hour drive from where I'm sitting.
Is that right?
It was maybe 20 square miles of grains. When they talk, they talk thousands of acres. Well, it 640 acres is a square mile. So it doesn't take too many square miles to make thousands of acres.
Gotcha.
So yes, it's harmful to lose anything on one hand. On the other, that kind of flooding and damage will be recovered in the next season typically. So that's not what we're so concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening right now, let's look at Australia, for example. A lot of grain comes from Australia. Half the country is having the worst drought since Caucasians have been there, about 200-something years. The other half of the country is having the worst flooding since Caucasians have been there. We're having severe flooding and drought here in the United States. In western Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, severe drought. In the farther east and in the Midwest where I am, the more rain than we've ever seen. Both of which are harmful. Now, any crop, whether you're talking grains or vegetables or fruit, they can tolerate lows and highs of temperature and lows and highs of precipitation. When you get to either extreme, too high of temperatures, too high of precipitation, you start losing a percentage of your crop. Going the other direction, the same thing applies. You start getting too high, too low of precipitation or too low of temperatures, you lose a percentage of your crop. You go to extremes either way, you'll lose your entire crop to the point where it costs more to run the diesel fuel than to try to harvest what little bit is out there. And that's where we're headed with this. We're losing massive amounts of the grains being grown in North America, South America, Europe, Asia, and Africa. Central Africa is one of the most resistant places to all this, although they're not very good at growing grains there for a number of reasons. Although they could, they can't. Much of the Midwest is still doing okay, and a lot of it is, in very bad trouble.
So you're saying there's trouble on the horizon for the amber waves of ethanol?
Well,
I'm just saying, because that's what it seems like.
Making alcohol from corn to put in your automobile is a pretty crazy thing.
It was
a lot of money changed hands. There's enough natural gas in Alaska by itself to run every car and every truck in this country for a century or more.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the consequence of burning natural gas? Water. You get water vapor. When you burn natural gas, you get water vapor. That's it.
Yeah. Well, you know.
Heaven forbid we should do that. It makes sense.
Well, what makes sense as far as engineering and everything else, this does not necessarily make sense in terms of these big companies and their profits.
Exactly. When their infrastructure doesn't support it, right?
I did 2 speaking tours in 94 and 95 for the Prophecy Club, spread out about 5 months apart. And the second tour, I had these people pushing this book on me about peak oil. Peak oil, peak oil. People scared to death. We're about to run out of fuel. Well, the oil companies stopped exploring for fuel, for oil reserves, about 15 years ago. They had more oil reserves than they could ever use up in many, many decades. And despite that, they're still finding more. It's the second most plentiful liquid on the planet. Peak oil is a bunch of bull hockey. If there's any shortage of anything, it's refining capacity.
Right.
That's the only thing there's a shortage of is refinery capacity. The whole thing about global warming, as put out by Al Gore and put out by NOAA, is a cover story to conceal and obfuscate what's really going on. The decision to come out with this cover story was made about 30 years ago, maybe not quite that long ago. 1979, the federal government of the United States knew what would be happening 30 years in the future. They wanted to keep the majority of the people, especially people who had payrolls and ran businesses, in the dark, so they would keep running their businesses and not wreck the economy by doing the right thing and taking care of their families. And they came up with a cover story. global warming, to obfuscate and confuse and conceal what's really going on. And they've done quite an excellent job. 99% of the people in this country don't have a clue what's going on or why.
No, that's for sure. John, I got a caller in queue, and it's Shepard. He's the founder of the Intel Hub, and I want to bring him on because he had a couple of questions to ask you, and I know he's got a lot of stuff going on. So let me bring him on board. Shep, you there?
Yeah, how's it going, guys?
It's going great,
good,
my man.
Good show. Interesting stuff. John, just two brief questions. I don't want to take up all your time. What do you think the motive behind weather manipulation might be?
Well, it's the nature of scientists to want to do something, figure out if they can do something, go ahead and do it. You can manipulate weather to achieve political goals, economic goals, and military goals. So if they can achieve those goals by manipulating weather, they will do so. If it's to their benefit to harm agriculture, let's say in Somalia, they will harm agriculture in Somalia, and they can cause too much rain or not enough rain and cause devastating effects on their agricultural crops there in Somalia. So that they can target, a HAARP can be aimed like a rifle.
It doesn't even take HAARP though, does it, John? I mean, in Vietnam and even before that, they were using weather manipulation.
Right. Well, putting the silver particles in the cloud seeding goes back many decades. You're right. And they can make clouds turn into rain, and they've been able to do that for at least 50 years.
Wow. Yeah.
They will do these things, Shepard, to achieve goals. If there's not a goal that makes sense for them, they won't do it. They won't.
Sure.
There was a hurricane in the Caribbean, just east of the Caribbean, about 3 years ago, and I think they were playing with it and having fun with it. They made this thing do a loop-de-loop in the Caribbean there, and Professor McCann looked at this thing. They made this thing go around like a shopping cart in the ocean. It was funny, and it caused no harm. And I think it was just one of their experiments just to see if they could do such a thing.
Sure. One other quick question, because I know you get good intel and you have good information, and you might, know of something. Have you had any information on any satellites or being censored or taken down in any way recently in the last
they won't,
few years?
Here's what they'll do. I can give you a good example. Stan Deyo, you probably all know Stan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Stan was accurately predicting earthquakes 24 to 72 hours before they happened for a couple of years. And his modality was using United States Navy information that came off satellites and other sensing devices. Well, they cut him off, and they cut us all off. It was publicly available. They cut off the public from that information. However, they still get it and keep it for themselves. And I'm sure they had scientists very diligently trying to figure out how Stan Deyo was able to do what he did. And Shepard, to answer your question, they may cut us off from anything coming from satellites. It doesn't mean the satellite stopped. It means they've cut us off from the imaging or the information or whatever may be coming.
Sure. A YouTuber was recently able to call a tornado today in Michigan, Dutch sense. And I was wondering what you might know about HAARP rings or HAARP circles and scalar squares, and then I'll take that off.
I'm aware of these things exist. Dutch Sense is from my hometown of St. Louis. I haven't figured out who he is yet. I might even know him. I don't know that.
That's scary.
Well, I was real active giving speeches around St. Louis for a number of years to conservative crowds, patriot crowds. But that aside, Dutch Sense has gained a big following for his research and his work, and gaining a lot of respect. It's something, quite frankly, gentlemen and Gwen, I have not looked into in any detail, and it's on my list of things to do.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great show. I'm going to tune in.
Appreciate it, Shep. Thanks for the call. Yeah,
see you, Shep.
It's interesting to see that we have reached a point where